How well are we serving Texas students? Visit commitpartnership.org/dashboard to see what percentage of students in your school district, legislative district, county, and state are meeting key academic milestones.
Not every child learns the same, right? And fortunately, I live in a state that supports education choice and allows parents and families to choose how to use those education dollars.
How well are we serving Texas students? Visit commitpartnership.org/dashboard to see what percentage of students in your school district, legislative district, county, and state are meeting key academic milestones.
Not every child learns the same, right? And fortunately, I live in a state that supports education choice and allows parents and families to choose how to use those education dollars.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Ewald. I serve the Texas Tribune as Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism. Welcome to those joining us here in person at Raise Your Hand Texas in Austin, and those joining us online for a two-part conversation today on attracting, preparing, and retaining the best teachers here in Texas. So our program this morning will run approximately 90 minutes. We have two 45-minute conversations moderated by my Tribune colleagues Sneha Day and Jaden Edison. Each of these conversations will include about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A, and so that we can get to as many questions as possible today. We're going to be doing our Q&A through our Q&A portal at texastribune.org/ask. That's texastribune.org/ask. You'll also find some signage around the space here, including some cards here at the end of the table. Can submit your questions that way, and we'll get to as many as possible. And if you're old school and want to write it down on a note card for me, I'll come and get that as well. Today's conversation is eligible for continuing professional education credits for Texas educators through the Association of Texas Professional Educators. You can learn more by visiting apte.org/tribune. That's apte.org/tribune. We are also grateful for the support of our sponsors today. Our major sponsors are Raise Your Hand Texas, Texas AFT, the Charles Butt Foundation, the Association of Texas Professional Educators, Commit Partnership, Class Wallet, and Houston Endowment. We want to thank our hosts, Raise Your Hand Texas and the Charles Butt Foundation, for hosting this event today. Just to offer a quick welcome on behalf of the Charles Butt Foundation is Petrie Darby.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Petrie Darby, and I'm the Vice President of Brand, Creative, and Communications for the Charles Butt Foundation. And on behalf of Raise Your Hand Texas and the Charles Butt Foundation, I want to welcome you to this important and timely event about teachers and the teaching profession. Both of our organizations have invested in supporting teachers and elevating the teaching profession through programs, grants, scholarships, storytelling, and advocacy, and we're thrilled that you're here. To all the teachers tuning in, I want to wish you a wonderful Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you for choosing one of the world's oldest, greatest, and most important professions that helps create all others. Your work is not just shaping individual lives, it is shaping the future of our entire state, because teachers truly give rise to the future. So thank you for being here.
Petrie, thank you so much. Thank you to all those around the state who make the journalism of the Tribune, including events like this, possible by becoming Texas Tribune members. To learn more and to become a member, you can visit texastribune.org/support. Less than 2 hours ago, we announced our first batch of speakers for the 2025 Texas Tribune Festival. Joining us in downtown Austin, November 13th through 15th, are Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Maureen Dowd, U.S. Representative Tony Gonzalez of San Antonio, Fort Worth Mayor Mattie Parker, U.S. Senator Adam Schiff, and U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett. Hear their thoughts and the thoughts of many others on state and national politics, the first year of the second Trump administration, the upcoming midterm elections, and the ideas driving the future of our state and nation. They'll have plenty to talk about. You can purchase your tickets now at tribfest.org. And just a quick plug for another education event we have coming up. We have a live taping of Tribcast Live, that's the Tribune's podcast, focused on education post-Ledge. That's going to be on June 11th at Austin Central Library. You can learn more about this and other events around the state at texastribune.org/events. So let's get to today's program. We want to look at both the challenges and opportunities surrounding teacher recruitment, training, and retention in Texas. We're going to look at both how we got here with our first conversation and where we go from here in our second conversation. So let's meet the panelists for our first conversation. Gene Streepy of Dallas is a Highland Park ISD high school business teacher and is current board chair for the State Board of Education certification. And I'm hoping I got this right. Region 10 Teacher of the Year and Texas Presidential Awardee for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. Bob Anderson is Chief of Human Resource Services for Klein ISD. He's been a principal at all 3 levels and a principal advocate for Raise Your Hand Texas, 2017 to 2019. I'm sure we'll hear more about his experience in the conversation. And Ryan Franklin is Managing Director for Policy and Advocacy at Philanthropy Advocates. He joined Philanthropy Advocates in 2024 after serving as a pivotal figure at Educate Texas under the Communities Foundation of Texas, where he played a role in advancing policies to support Texas students and teachers. And our moderator, Sneha Day, is an education reporter for the Texas Tribune, working in partnership with Open Campus. She covers pathways from education to employment and the accessibility of post-secondary education in Texas, with an eye on college readiness, community colleges, and career and technical training. I welcome our panel. I thank all who have joined us today and turn the program over to Sneha.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our panelists. We have a really great set of panelists who come from this, have been thinking about this for a long time in terms of how to keep, recruit, and retain our best teachers. Texas today is hemorrhaging its teachers. It's a challenge that has big implications for how students learn. And so in this panel, we're going to get into how we got here. Ryan, I'd like to start with you. Can you paint a picture for me for just how serious this is and how the pandemic really changed things for this trend that we're seeing?
Yeah, so thanks for having me this morning. So we saw coming out of the pandemic a massive explosion in uncertified teachers in the state, sort of underprepared, uncertified teachers, to the point now where we are over 50% of newly hired teachers in the state being uncertified. The impacts of that on student learning are significant, where we have, just overall, our student performance is not where it needs to be as a state. Just roughly about 60% of students are below grade level in math, and about 50% of students are below grade level in reading. It's not a surprise when we look at the data around the impact of uncertified teachers, where we see teachers losing 3 to 4 or more months of instruction when taught by an uncertified teacher. So we've seen this explosion coupled with sort of driven by increased attrition rates at the same time as increased hiring rates for districts. And so a lot of factors go into that I hope we can unpack, but I'm also excited about the opportunities we have with this legislative session to make investments in building that supply of well-prepared teachers.
I'm hearing a lot of pain points that we'll get into this panel. Bob, I'd like to just turn it to you. How have you seen the teacher shortage impact Klein and the student learning across the district?
Oh, well, thank you for having me here. I want to say hi to my 2 favorite teachers, my wife, a 2nd grade teacher, and my mom, a retired teacher. But in Klein, we're no different than any other school district in our state. We've had the challenges that have presented itself through the pandemic, and what that was a need to hire. We had people that were leaving our profession. There was fear in our whole world, and so we had to hire, and a lot of districts hired people that could come in and be part of the system. They didn't necessarily be certified. They weren't sure that's what they wanted. And so what that presented was a group of people that now have a challenge to try to, this wasn't their profession. This wasn't what they chose to do. And so we're trying to assimilate them into a system that's got very, very high standards. Klein ISD, like all of the districts in the state, we expect our students to learn. And so if you have very high standards coupled with people that aren't experienced, you can see what's happening. And so that made us do a complete about-face about 4 years ago. And so once we realized the implications of that, we have put things in place to I want to celebrate the fact that we don't struggle, kind of the data you just heard from Ryan, we're not struggling from that in Klein. And so I think there's things we've done to prevent that, but I think we all started from the same place because of the challenges that the pandemic presented our system.
Can you explain a little bit what the pandemic meant for the classroom, for teachers, how that contributed to teachers leaving?
Well, I think it's a society as a whole. You can see that people respond differently to things now. 10 years ago, if something were to happen, there may have been a phone call between a parent and a teacher, and that would have been dealt with. But there's a different way people respond, and I think that's created some challenges in our system. Some of our teachers aren't able to answer that because the way that things are coming at them is very aggressive, and that's something that they weren't used to. They're seeing behaviors that happened that we didn't see before the pandemic, okay? And so we can't put our head in the sand and say those don't exist anymore. We have to create systems to help our teachers do that, and when you do that, you start to see teachers that want to return and be a part of our organization. And so I think that the pandemic created lots of challenges for us, And I think that we have to be much more proactive in how we deal with those challenges, because if we aren't, then we're setting our teachers up to failure. Because people are different now than they were before the pandemic. We have to be honest about that.
Jean, you sat on the task force the governor created to look at and examine the retention and recruitment challenges we're facing across the state. What did you learn about why teachers are leaving in droves?
Well, just to ground us back, first of all, thank you for having me. Second, when we had the beginning of that teacher vacancy task force, it was in 2022. So we were just coming out of the pandemic. We spent a year. There were about 50 people on the task force. Half were teachers, half were administrators. Mostly the administrators were human resources or superintendents. And as you might imagine, we had lots of things that we wanted fixed. But I thought the process of going through all of those things and thinking about what is it that is common to all of us that we need? And that was the teacher prep and the support for teachers. And so a lot of that fell out into three major groups. One was working conditions, as you said, particularly coming out of the pandemic. The other one was compensation, of course. And then the part that I worked the most on was teacher preparation and support. So some of the things we've already heard echoed here today. And I think there's some conversation around what of those things existed before the pandemic and what things were exacerbated by the pandemic. And I think those are good conversations to have as well.
I think one of the things, I mean, we're talking about the pandemic a lot, but this is really a 40-year problem and a trend that the pandemic has really just added to and accelerated. If anything, we tend to think of teachers as being university prepared, hands-on training, student teaching. That has not been the norm in Texas for a very long time. And so this is, if anything, the pandemic accelerated a shift that was already underway with the rapid expansion of fast-track preparation and less emphasis on the kinds of practice-based, hands-on preparation that we know are most effective.
I might jump back in on that also. So you can be traditionally prepared. I'm a second career teacher, and I was prepared in 2005. So I came out of the business side. I'd worked in business for over 10 years, and I came home one night and said, I think I want to be a middle school math teacher, to which my husband was a little surprised. And so I went back to school because I wanted to do student teaching. I wanted to be traditionally prepared, but I, at that time, could see the shift already. There were lots of people coming out of alternative certification, and so that was the shift we were seeing. It's not unlike the shift we're seeing now in people going from either traditional to alt-cert, from alt-cert to not certified.
So I think just to add to that, that reality was the non-certified, but now we have a DOI portion. Okay, and that happened before the pandemic. Okay,
What is DOI?
DOI is a District of Innovation. You can create something, and there's different categories. And so I think that, to Ryan's point, that having that as an avenue, it wasn't designed. The people that created the DOI model didn't design it for us to put them an English teacher in the classroom. It was truly designed for your career and technical classes where, you know, we need an auto mechanic teacher, and so the best person to teach auto mechanics is probably an actual person that works in an auto shop, okay? And we realized that that person probably wasn't going to get a certification in education because it wouldn't be in their financial best interest. So that was why DOI initiated in that certification part of DOI. There's a couple other areas of DOI. But so I think having that, but that opened the door to me being able to put anybody in a classroom. And I think that really accelerated because the training that she received is different than a DOI. Okay, a DOI person has no training. Okay, I don't have to have any training, I have to have a degree. Okay, and I think that made it a little harder when you're not even going through a program at all, and now I can just become a teacher as long as I have a degree in a university. So I think all of these things together kind of created where we are today, because now we have that challenge.
So we're talking about different types of preparation programs. This is all coming from this idea that teachers are best when they have that high quality preparation. Ryan, what is the value of getting certified? What kind of impact does that have on students, on the teachers, on the classroom, and how do different types of programs change that value?
Yeah, so I think I would shift it and think the value of being prepared versus just the value of being certified, because there are lots of routes to become certified, and we see differences in routes that require more hands-on training, preparation before becoming the official teacher. So there are lots of pathways to certification, and Chair Streepy and the State Board for Educator Certification have done a great job of sort of raising the bar on preparation and what it means, but the value is really in preparation. And so we see with well-prepared teachers that there, instead of losses in learning, there are actually gains in the classrooms by those teachers. We see lower disciplinary rates. We see higher rates of identification for students with special needs, dyslexia, other things. So across the board, teachers that receive hands-on practice-based preparation that leads to a certification outperform the uncertified teachers or the teachers that don't have the benefit of that hands-on preparation before entering the classroom.
Just to underscore this, what do you worry about when teachers don't have that preparation or entering the classroom?
Well, first and foremost, I worry about student learning loss. Like, there are real impacts to student learning when they don't have a well-prepared teacher in the classroom, in particular in our foundation curriculum. So that's first and foremost. The second thing, it's very difficult for these teachers. It is a challenging job for a well-prepared person. Teaching is a really hard job that requires skills that are learned over time. And so if you're throwing someone unprepared in there, they are very unlikely to stay in the classroom, and it just creates a self-fulfilling prophecy and a revolving door of unprepared teachers being replaced by unprepared teachers, and it just perpetuates itself and kind of creates the same hole in the system over time. And so it has really negative impacts for the students in the classroom. It has negative impacts for the well-prepared teachers and the teachers that are doing the work, because they're having to carry along and mentor and support these less prepared teachers. So it creates strains across the system, but first and foremost, the impact on student learning.
Jean, I'd love to get your thoughts. You're in the classroom every day. What gets in the way of teachers getting certified? You went through a traditional program. You're working with uncertified teachers, certified teachers. What is the thought process between whether to get certified or go straight into the classroom?
Well, of course, I think there are a lot of factors that go to this. I think all of these things are multifaceted that we have to think through from the teacher point of view in the district and from the parents and the children and the stakeholders. And so I think some of the things are people thinking it's easy to come in and teach. And whether or not, if I leave tomorrow, whether someone can come in and teach my class as well as I do. And so I think that's an underlying decision we have to think about a little bit more. The next thing is, if I can take an easier route and I have 2 children at home and I'm already coming out of one job and I want to switch to another job and it's already paying, then I cannot, it's unlikely that I can go and do student teaching as someone who's transitioning to a new job. The next one would be, oh, well, if I've already have experience with children, if I'm already a Girl Scout leader, or I'm a coach, or I've spent a lot of time around kids and I'm really great at math, do I really need a certification? And so I think that's some of the underlying issue in there is, what's the value of it? Which brings us back to what Ryan said. It's the practice. What are the things that make that preparation useful for our teachers? And that's time in the classroom. That's being observed and coached and mentored. The use of having, or the benefit of having someone around you that's lifting you up and saying, yes, try it this way, or that didn't work, let's try it this way. So that practice in the classroom, time in the classroom, observations, those are the things that we move toward at the State Board for Educator Certification that we want to have in place, because I agree with you, it's the preparation itself.
So let me add to that, because I think one of the things that the cost, what Ryan's talking about, the cost of all of this, you know, if I have a brand new teacher that come in and it's uncertified and I have to replace them, it's $20,000 of training I've just spent, okay? So one of the things we've targeted that I think has been really valuable for us in our school district is we put them as substitutes, and we don't treat substitutes like they were when you and I were in school. Okay, our substitutes get real training, they get real opportunities, and they have a chance to see a few things. Number one, is this for me? Okay, the cost to me is a little lower organizationally if a substitute comes in and is not able to. Secondly, we don't do the normal sub hiring. We have to have interviews with our subs. We have campus leaders that come interview them because, look, they're looking for who's going to work on their campuses. We train them. They have an opportunity to be a part of teams, and they see what it's like to be in a classroom team and to work together in the commitment part. One of the things we hear from our teachers is when people aren't certified or they're just coming into the system, they don't understand the commitment that's being made. Okay, I can tell you firsthand, on Saturday, someone at my house is working, and it's my wife. Okay. I may be in the central office area. I'm not having to do as much on a Saturday as my wife, planning lessons and doing all the things. People miss that. Parents don't see that. And it is a very challenging job that they deserve the respect that they get for that. And it's that much harder when you have an uncertified teacher there where she's having to plan for that teacher too. Okay? Because guess what they don't do is they don't throw the kids away. Our teachers love the children, okay? And so they're going to put the children first regardless of how many uncertified teachers are there or no one's coming or committing. So we use that substitute as a way to bring them, to bring them into our organization. It gives them a picture, okay? The first time they come in, if they have a bad experience, we get them to a different level, get them to a different school, a different leader, okay? We try to treat them as people that could be our next professionals. And in this past school year, we hired 254 subs, and 67 of them are current employees of ours. So the system is working. 25% of our folks made it in and matriculated into full teachers that are now on their pathway to certification. And so we use that to try to create that pathway so that they don't stumble at the very beginning, okay?
I just think that's huge, and I mean, you're a humble guy, but the work y'all have led in the district, y'all really are turning the needle, and your data shows that y'all are doing that, and y'all are being able to get the kind of population. I think as a state, we've made it a rational decision for individuals not to get a certification. It is a rational economic decision to say, wait, I can go get paid the same amount. I can not incur the cost of preparation and certification for the same thing. That is a rational decision. And so long as that's the case, people are going to make that rational economic decision, and maybe they stay, maybe they go. But that's one of the things I'm excited about. Some of the proposals that are on the table across the street is to look at creating incentives for people to get certification, to get that kind of hands-on practice in the classroom and support of that.
I want to stay on that, Ryan. How have policy decisions from the legislature shaped this reliance on uncertified teachers, and what do we need to do to move away from that?
Well, it's a complex policy environment, but just first and foremost, opening the door. Wherever you set the floor is where most people are going to gravitate to in this space. So the floor is, if a district will hire you, you can become a teacher currently. And so I think just creating that environment, but it's also about the lack of incentives. I don't know many people today that go to college that don't have to work their way through school, to have a part-time job, a full-time job, to work their way through college. In the past, historically, people took a whole semester off to student teaching. Most people cannot afford to do that now. So opportunities that we have to supplement, create a salary, a living stipend for our student teachers or our teacher residents is huge in changing who can access the teaching profession and who's available to be our best teachers moving forward. So there are opportunities there to pivot and change away, both in raising the floor and removing and adding additional incentives. So it really is both the carrot and the stick.
I might jump in on that. If you want our teachers to be certified, it takes money, it takes time, and it takes effort for those people. And so the best time to help them choose quality preparation is at the very beginning. When someone says, I want to be a teacher, which route do they take? I love the idea of starting as a long-term substitute or someone in a building so that they know what they're getting their into and what they're choosing. But if they're standing in that space, are they going to choose, I'm not going to be certified, I'm going to be certified online, or I'm going to choose a program that has deep practice opportunities, observation opportunities, someone who is going to support me through that process. So how do we help people, first of all, know that those are the choices they're making? They may not even recognize if someone offers them a job that they could have had a more fruitful path through certification. And so first of all, how do we make them aware of it? And then also, how do we help them through that process?
I want to transition to talking about keeping teachers. Ryan, I want to start with you. we've talked a lot about teacher preparation. What does it mean? What implications does teacher preparation have for keeping teachers in the classroom?
Teachers who are well prepared stay in the classroom for longer. I mean, just as a fact, kind of universally. So if we want to keep teachers, we need to start on the front end and prepare them better. Beyond that, there's a whole lot that supports, like, if you feel effective at something, you are more likely to stick with that. And if you are well prepared, you are more likely to feel effective. So that sense of agency and effectiveness is huge on retaining teachers. There's obviously, you're better prepared to deal with the disciplinary issues that arise. You're better prepared to deal with parent issues that arise. You're better prepared to lead learning in the classroom if you have some level of preparation beforehand.
Klein raised the teacher pay despite sort of navigating a budget shortfall. Why was that important for y'all, Bob?
I think it's important to prioritize. So when you talk about that moment, we raised the teacher pay. We didn't necessarily raise everyone's pay in the district. They got a percentage, but teachers got a higher percentage. And I think it's talking about what's the most important, okay? Classroom instruction is the most important, but right next to that is the building leader, okay? And so I think when we talk about retention and certification and stuff, I think you can't miss the fact that the leader of the school is going to determine a lot of things. What space do they give their teachers? How are they ensuring, are they doing things in Klein that we do called stay interviews? Are we ensuring that we're solving problems that people are having before they quit on us? Okay? There's this thing in our world now called quiet quitting. People will start quitting in our organizations typically around October and November, okay? And they start looking for the next job. Well, if you have an interview with them and you talk to them and you start processing with them what are the concerns and you start to fix those concerns, you see that they see that you care about their process. They see that you learn things about certifications and people that may need next steps. So for us, the residency program is huge. I think kids nowadays are in a great shape. They go to college, and when I went to college, I paid for my teacher training. Okay, I had 6 months off. I had to do that. We're paying them now for full year programs. Those people are much more prepared. Okay, in Klein, we lead the state, and we hire about 92% of our residents into full-time jobs the next school year. Why? Because they've been there for a whole year. Okay, we aren't stuck. We don't say if you're at this school, you got to stay at this school. We'll let them have various opportunities, but they get something that the others don't have, is they get that experience so that they can step into a team and lead it. And they're not like first-year teachers. They're like second-year teachers that they come in and they're able to work through that. That really like buoys the other teachers on the team so that they want to come back too. And so I think that's one component, but for us, another thing that I talked back there about was the DOI. We don't allow someone to be on a perpetual DOI anymore. We provide them, and I love Jane's point about what bucket are you going to put them in? Well, we don't allow them to sit in bucket one, okay? You can come, because I want to make sure that it's very clear that there's no one great teacher, okay? I have people that are alternative certified that are amazing. We have teachers of the year that were that way. I have DOI people that were teachers of the year, okay? It doesn't mean that you can't start in our system, but what we're saying is once you come, we're going to connect you with 5 different university partners or ESC center where you can get certified, but you have a certain amount of time to get it done. And if you don't, then you can't stay in the organization. And I think that tells the other teachers in our system that we care about certifications. That matters to us. And so we're not going to let you do that. And the only one caveat, of course, is that CTE where it was created. And we wouldn't want to ruin a student's experience by not letting them have the right type of teacher in that. But I think if we can create those setups for our teachers, they see the buy-in from the district, and they see that we're going to put our money where our mouth is.
I might jump on that as far as the DOI and where someone is a DOI. And I think it's important to understand if you have a District of Innovation candidate who's not certified, I think one of the things you need to think about is what are they teaching? So are they teaching a skill in a high school that's an industry skill that we're lucky to have them there teaching for us? Maybe they're an architect or a welder or another career tech education field. And so that's a different thought process than are they teaching my second grader to read? And I think sometimes that gets lost in the DOI conversation, but that's always the first thing I think about is what are they teaching? So right now, I believe 22% of high school CTE are not certified, but think about whether 10% or 12% of core subjects in the elementary schools right now. And so I think those are 2 different conversations that we just need to be aware of.
Am I hearing from you that there needs to be a prioritization of those like foundational, those core subjects and certifying teachers in those subjects?
Well, of course, I would love everyone to be certified and have a great mentor and have total support and great background in discipline and running a classroom and helping differentiate instruction for the students in their classes. But at some point, I do think that's a conversation. If we have to prioritize, then for me, I would prioritize that a second grade reading teacher is certified over a high school architecture teacher.
In a minute, we're going to turn over to questions, so feel free to get those ready and raise your hand and make a nod to Matt if you have a question in mind. Jean, I have one last question for you. Is it harder today to be a teacher than it used to be? What is making it difficult for a teacher to want to stay when they love the job?
Well, I do think it depends also, again, on what you're teaching. I think I taught middle school math is where I started for 13 years, and then I did STEM for 3. And so I think being in a math classroom, for example, my last year in math, I had 32 students every 52 minutes, and it was a busy day. It was fun, it went fast, and but we were busy. And so I think that part of the job itself is hard, but I think what happened during the pandemic for me is it just had a whole nother layer. And so you were trying to remediate once the pandemic was over, or you were teaching in a mask, or you were teaching in a shield. And so I think all of those things then came after the pandemic. We were working so hard on remediation, and we were trying to catch kids up and then move kids forward. And so I think the disparities of the differences of learning needs in your classroom, and that tells you right there, it's great to have a certified teacher who can differentiate your instruction. But I think the piece that tipped the scales in some respects is then when teachers started quitting, then who was left to pick up the pieces, to train the people who are not certified, to help someone who is new? Because if you have a team of 5 math teachers and 3 of them are brand new, you're going to have conversations about discipline, and you're going to be having conversations about classroom management as opposed to math conversations. And so I think in that respect, yes, it has become more difficult in that you're wearing more hats. So if we can get more certified teachers who come with us to the table with at least a baseline of knowledge and familiarity and comfort in the classroom and basic teacher skills that we know they have, then we can take the next step forward together.
We're going to turn it over to questions.
Thank you so much for that great conversation. And just a reminder, we have a full house here at Raise Your Hand Texas. You can ask questions at texastribune.org/ask, or there's a few papers around with a QR code where you can ask it, but that's at texastribune.org/ask. Monty from Austin asks, so the panel spoke a lot about the student teaching portion of Ed Prep. The majority of high-quality programs are teaching candidates in a college classroom themselves, learning about the mountain of research-based science of teaching and learning. Can the panel speak to the value of that and how we get more candidates to go through these programs?
I'll speak to that. I think there's always an enduring question about the balance of practice, physical practice, and theory. When you are learning about teaching, you're learning about differentiation, but you might not yet be in the classroom, so you don't actually see the needs in the classroom. So I think there's a balance to being in a classroom and learning the theory. Those things took me well through my first 3 to 5 years when I could look back and I knew, and then I was able to apply those theories. But I think the practice piece of it is the part that will make the difference for our teachers in being able to apply that theory.
Jose from Cypress Fairbanks ISD writes, does the proposed legislation increase the supply of new teachers or does it shift individuals from student teaching to paid residencies, et cetera? How do we increase supply?
I think one of the things that's exciting about the proposed legislation that at least Senate Bill 2253 really takes an all of the above approach to increasing the supply of well-prepared teachers. So it looks at high-quality residency and traditional student teaching models and provides funding for students and for preparation programs and for districts to implement those. But it also opens the door for practice-based alternative certification, for district-run grow your own programs. So it really takes an all-of-the-above approach to increasing the supply of well-prepared teachers.
I love this question. It's my favorite question I get about how do you get more teachers. So the reality is there's a lot of components to get more teachers. Number one, I firmly believe that we need to honor teachers. Okay, like all of us in society, we all have children. How do we show the teachers that teach our very children that we love them and care about them? How do we assume positive intent with them? I'm going to tell you that, and this may not be a popular one, but I think that the media is part of it, okay? If the story is always negative about teaching, turn on the news, it's never positive about teaching. We have 8,000 teachers in our schools, in my school system, and I can guarantee you 7,900 of them are doing a great job every day, okay? So I think we need to celebrate them, but I think we have to collectively as a society across the street need to pay them more, okay? You don't have this conversation with doctors and lawyers. Teachers are just as valuable to our system as doctors and lawyers. They train the next doctors and lawyers. So I just think it's real important that we as a society decide what do we care about. And I think the way we treat teachers is one, the way we prepare them is one, the way our systems make sure that they're certified and be successful. So school systems have ownership in this as well. Colleges and universities have ownership in this. But we all need to work together to realize we have a vacuum where there aren't as many, and we need to do the best we can to get them, because there's no solution that's going to be dealt with by a few vouchers. That's not going to solve this problem, okay? The issue is going to have to be we collectively work together, because the vast majority of the kids in Texas will always be in a public school.
This question gets at a point you just made that teachers don't exist in a vacuum, that it takes a community, and wondering specifically about relationship kind of in this moment between educators and students, families, guardians, et cetera. I mean, the specific question here is, how do quote unquote passionate parents factor into these challenges? It seems like overly involved, sometimes conspiracy-fueled parents make the job even harder for teachers. This question, how does parental over-involvement affect teacher retention, but perhaps just commenting on the state of parent or guardian involvement in general and how that might add to the challenges right now.
Bob, do you want to take this one?
So first off, parents being involved is great. We want parents involved, you know. Part of the things I created was Parent University. I want parents collectively there, but I think it's a partnership. And so I think that's where we have to make sure that we're working with our parents to make it a partnership. If things are negative, then the way we deal with that is the way we have to train our teachers how to deal with that. I think one of the things we didn't do post-pandemic is show our folks how to deal with an individual that's a little more aggressive. Social emotional health is lower than it was prior to the pandemic. We just have to be honest about where we are in society, and then how can we help our parents and our teachers to respond to those things. So how do we train them? There are easy ways to solve problems, and one of them is not to sit behind a computer and send messages back and forth. Have a phone call, bring them in for a conference. When you're human, things are dealt with differently. And so I think it's how we train people so that they can make that work together collectively. We do a lot better when we do that. But again, just like teachers, 99.9% of parents are amazing. We love parents in our system. They come in, they beautify everything we need, they donate. Teacher appreciation this week right now, I guarantee you there's parents out there donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to our teachers. And so I want to celebrate the vast majority of them, and the ones that are challenging, we need to work together to make sure that they know that they're valued. What they care about is valued, but we have to do it in a way that's positive and productive. And so I think that's how we train our folks to do that. That's not easy, and a lot of adults don't know how to do that. Our adults hide behind a screen a lot more than they are willing to make phone calls. And I tell you right now, my wife is a genius at this. I've heard it on the other side. She makes a phone call, everything goes down a lot calmer. And so it's just how we train our folks to deal with things. We can't act like it doesn't exist.
One of the great things about events like this is we have folks watching from around the state. John from Lufkin asks, how can rural schools access the same preparation options that urban districts seem to access, and how do universities perhaps fit into the preparation equation?
Well, I was a rural teacher, and the challenges are real, and they're more today than they've ever been. One of the most exciting parts about the proposed legislation is that it would provide a substantial funding boost for both rural districts and high poverty districts. And so the legislature is recognizing this, recognizing it from a teacher compensation perspective and recognizing it from a teacher preparation perspective and putting incentives in there so those rural districts can access the same levels of high quality preparation. And we've got great examples around the state. Just down the road from Lufkin, Corrigan Camden, they're working with Stephen F. Austin around a residency program. Out in rural West Texas, Snyder ISD has partnered with Texas Tech to establish high-quality preparation programs and coupling it with the teacher incentive allotment and really thinking broadly about doing this. So I think we've got strong examples of rural districts doing this around the state, and the legislature is poised to incentivize that and provide an extra funding boost for rural and high-need districts and campuses.
Lauren from Austin states, there are many education technology companies that are offering certified teachers and instruction through virtual means. What do you think of these virtual options? Do you think this helps districts who are struggling, looking for prepared teachers for targeted or specific instructions? Or does it hurt districts by not looking for teachers to be in person in the classroom?
Bob, you may have seen that more than I have, so I'll let you take this one in just a sec. But I do think that learning online is, in this day and age, it's just a reality. And so I think people need to be able to learn online. I think our kids at some point in their careers, whether it's from the pandemic or from a choice, that they're going to have to learn online, just like some of our teacher candidates do as well. It's the support that is behind that. It's the practice that's behind that will make the difference for the teachers. And I suspect the same is true for the students, but I'll let you take that.
Yeah, just the total truth there. The reality is that's how they're going to learn. We can't put our head in the sand and say that's not a system of learning. But then what are you doing with them once they come to the campus? How are you supporting them? How are you making sure that that learning gets translated to the campus? Because that's just another mechanism for learning now. And we just need to recognize it's there. We need to make sure we understand what is being taught in those programs so that we can make sure we support that once it comes to our system. But I think it goes back to the question just before, when we start thinking about like our retention system and things that we want, we have to ask the people. Too many times in this profession, how I started in this profession is it was a employee-driven or employer-driven profession. Now we're in an employee-driven profession. There's more openings and less people. So we need to ask them when they leave, why did you leave? We need to try to get them before that. We need to, in the Stephen F. Austin example, right there in Lufkin's backyard of Stephen F. Austin, they could use their residency. They've got a great residency. We partner with them as well. So ask them why they're not staying or ask them why they're not coming. And how can we make sure we're listening to our people so that we can retain our teachers and finding out what it is of concern to them. And I can tell you, when we survey ours, pay is not number one. Pay is not number one for teachers when we survey them. It's important to them, and we need to pay them, don't get it wrong, but support is number one. How are we going to support them? How are we going to make sure that they have what they need? How are we going to make sure that we're there for them when they need us? That is always number one in our system when we ask our teachers what do they need.
As another question for Dr. Anderson. Jonathan from Dallas asks, what has motivated your district to make these investments in your teacher workforce? Do you see peers in other districts prioritizing in the same way?
I definitely think our system is shifting and changing, but what motivated us is what Ryan said earlier. We care about student learning. We want students to learn, and then we also, right next to that, is we want teachers to be successful in their jobs. There's no school that's successful if the teachers always turn over. We have a school in our school district called Niche Elementary, which is a 90% economics Spanish school that's a blue ribbon school. How did they get there? They have a very, very high teacher retention rate, and they have a principal that's destined to say, hey, you're going to care about student learning first. And how did they get that? They get it by preparing those teachers, keeping those teachers in our system. So I think it's just real important that we do everything we can to make sure that teachers are successful, because when that happens, students are then in turn successful. So it was generated by this desire to be successful and making sure that our district was continuing to provide for our kids. And we want that for every district in the state because we care about all the 5 million of them.
I couldn't tell, Sneha. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I'd like
please.
I'd like to wrap this up with one final question. We're going to head into a second panel where we focus on where we can move from here. So to our panelists here, I'd like to do a round robin and have you all speak to if there was one thing, one move that you would like to see the legislature or other district leaders make to turn this trend around, what would it be? For
me, it would be helping teachers choose quality and incentivizing that they take a quality route to preparation, because an elementary teacher may teach 1,000 kids to read, and a middle school math teacher might teach pre-algebra to 5,000 kids across their career. And I think incentivizing from the beginning is what I'd like to see.
I can't say it better than that. If we can get more candidates leaving through high-quality preparation programs, that would change the game in education in Texas. That single investment in incentivizing quality preparation and making it accessible for candidates would absolutely change outcomes statewide.
I think I agree with that. And for me, I think that there's a bill they have right now that will pay teachers more. And I think that they need to pass that. And I firmly believe they should have passed it before they passed the other one. But the truth is that I think you have to show teachers you care about them. This is not a political issue for teachers. I need you to understand that. Paying and having the ability to support your family, a lot of our teachers are doing second and third jobs because in 2019 is the last time we saw a raise in our stuff, and inflation is up over 25%. So everyone in this room pays more for eggs. The teacher has the same amount of money to do it. And so I just think that you have to show them you care by doing that. And all the other hoops, they're going to jump through because teachers care about kids. That's the beauty of this whole deal. Just pay them a little more, keep them there. They're going to do all these things we talked about because they're the reason that our society will continue to grow. And so for me, I just want them to pass that bill. I'd like for there to be more money in there, to be honest with you, but we'd take something because I can promise you public schools aren't afraid of private schools. Okay? If you compete with us on the same level and you give us the same playing field, we're going to win every time. Okay? Public schools have amazing teachers in them and do amazing things.
All right, with that, let us give our panel a big round of applause. We just ask everyone here, we're going to move right into the second panel. We know we have a bunch of people who need to make it over to the Capitol, so we want to be really respectful of your time. As our panel steps off the stage, we're going to have our second panel come on up here. And just a reminder, folks, we mentioned as the panel takes the stage that today's conversation is eligible for continuing professional education credits for Texas educators through the Association of Texas Professional Educators. And you can learn more by visiting apte.org/Tribune. I welcome our panel to the stage, and Jaden, what I might do here rather than rattle off bios and being very respectful of our speakers up here, Jaden, perhaps just have the panel introduce themselves. Jaden, you starting by introducing yourself, have the panel introduce themselves, then we can get right into the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here, everybody. Good to see y'all. My name is Jaden Edison. I'm the public education reporter with the Tribune. Really glad to be here today and continue this important discussion. I guess we got big shoes to fill after the first discussion was had. But yeah, we can go down our panel if each person wants to introduce themselves, and then we'll get right into the discussion given the time restrictions that we have. So,
good morning. Is this on?
Yeah, you're on. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. My name is Stacy Childs. I'm one of the 15 members of the State Board of Education. I represent the Houston area. I just started my third year, my second term, so I'm so excited to be doing that work. By day, I am a criminal defense attorney, and prior to being an attorney, I was a 4th and 5th grade teacher through the Teach for America pipeline, and I'm very proud of that. So thank you for having me.
Testing. Okay, awesome. Hi, my name is Cadence Carter. I'm a former student of KDISD. I'm a queer rights and student/youth activist in the Houston area.
Hi, I'm Carol Malone. I'm the chief of schools at Hutto ISD. I work in both human resources and school leadership, and so I'm very proud to be here today.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot to unpack and a lot to talk about, and obviously there are so many things in this that we won't be able to get to, but, you know, I think the first panel really set the floor for, you know, what are the challenges that the state is facing, you know, when we talk about teacher preparation, teacher certification, and what our approach really is to talk about solutions, right, moving forward. Like, what are the things that schools and districts and leaders, what are the things they should be thinking about as we try to meet the moment and address the challenges that are facing our teacher workforce, but also, you know, our students, right, which are, you know, at the end of the day are the people who the state is trying to serve the most. And so I wanted to open it up with this kind of broad, almost like philosophical question. We were talking about this in the back. And I think each panelist will have some really interesting insight here, but I'm curious to hear from y'all's standpoint, like, what makes an effective teacher in 2025, right? When we talk about that, to each person, what does that mean to y'all as we talk today? And if we want to start with Kara, if you want to start first, yeah, we can come
I
down
don't mind jumping in. One of the things I think about a lot is it goes back to the work of a researcher named John Hattie. Know thy impact. I think an effective teacher is one that's constantly looking to see if kids are learning, making sure that they're monitoring, but also thinking about the needs of students. Sometimes if a student's hungry, they're not quite ready to learn. And so all of those pieces are huge in being a teacher. And so it's a pretty extensive job to get through all of the barriers and actually make sure kids are learning and able to progress to the next grade level.
Mm-hmm. Cadence, if you wanted to.
I think nowadays it's very difficult to be an effective teacher because teachers nowadays have to wear so many different hats. They have to be teachers and sometimes also counselors and sometimes also parents and also so many different things. And so it's very difficult to be an effective all-around teacher. But I feel like what makes a very good educator is someone who's able to be engaging and able to grab attentions and able to keep those attentions on what's really important. Because when a subject becomes entertaining or interesting, the retention is so much higher.
Mm-hmm. Stacey.
So for me, I think there are 4 things that make an effective teacher. The first thing is just having understanding. There are some great first-year teachers out there, but for the most part, teaching is like fine wine. You get better with time, right? So just having that understanding that you're not going to get it all right the first year or the second year. Secondly, just having a level of humility, right? I think that we've done a disservice to the teaching workforce by breeding this culture of perfectionism. Like you have to get it right, you have to have 100% on your STAR scores, but just knowing that you can ask for help. You can reach out to veteran teachers. You can reach out to your administrators if there's something that you're struggling on in the classroom. Finally, just being data-minded in the back of your mind. And I think sometimes we weaponize data too much, but data is your friend, right? So just knowing that data, when it comes to your students, tells a story about how you can improve your student outcomes. And finally, just a relentless list. Like, I didn't get it right today, but I have tomorrow. I didn't get it right today, but I have tomorrow. Just a relentless list to make sure that you're doing all you can for students. So.
Yeah, no, this brings up a lot of interesting points. And Kara, I wanted to go to you, right? Because I know there was a lot of talk about teacher preparation and teacher certification. And I want to open up that question to kind of frame a little bit like how each person, thinks about these issues, but also that's probably informed how in your district y'all have really structured your approach to trying to, bring in, aspiring educators, from the community to come and work and to grow and to, work with students. And so I'd be curious if you could break down for us what's happening in Hutto, which is, I read a national article last week where y'all were cited. Y'all have been all over the place. What's going on in Hutto right now in terms of how y'all are addressing this issue of trying to bring in effective and high quality teachers?
I'm so glad you asked. We actually have the first Department of Labor registered teacher apprenticeship program in Central Texas. I have 67 who are in the process of becoming teachers right now in my district. And we're so proud of this program. And so part of the program came out of the realization that we as a school district have to own the issues that we have. Hutto is a fast growth district. We're the 4th fastest growing in this area. And so that means that we're opening a school almost every year. I'm adding about 40 new positions every year. And like everybody else, we have about 18% attrition every year. So with all of that, we couldn't just sit around and wait for for something to happen. We have a wonderful residency program that we started with T-class funds, and we wanted more. We couldn't get as many residents as we thought we could grow. 63% of my teachers have over 5 years of experience, so we have a tremendous capacity to grow teachers. And so we embarked on our own journey of thinking about how do we bring people to the profession? How do we give them experiences where they are ready to be teachers, which is a huge component with retention. And so we started this journey last January. We did an information night for an apprenticeship program, and 197 people came. And so I looked around the room, and we are constantly hoping to fill our classrooms with teachers who represent our students, and the room represented that very thing. And so we ended up with over 90 applicants. We interviewed over 70 people. We originally said we would have 50 apprentices, but once we started the program, then we had people within our district who were suddenly interested. And so we ended up with 67. At the end of this year, I will have all but 4 continuing into next year. We just signed 6 of those who have finished our program. But what they do is they earn and learn. So we employ them. We do have 13 that were already employed with our district. We employ them. We put them in wonderful situations where they are learning to become a teacher. We give them a half a day of training every month. There's 4 different levels. They come to us with as few as 0 college hours all the way up to they're almost done. We help them enroll in a program. They're completing their education. They are not in the classroom alone teaching. They are working under the direction of a certified teacher, and they are becoming fantastic teachers. And so we are thrilled because we realize that there are people right in front of us who do want to become teachers. 18 of our students graduated from Hutto High School. 1 graduated last year, but the rest have been out a little bit. And what we realized was that there are so many people out there with some college, and they just don't have a path. And so I began to realize maybe we have an opportunity problem more than we have people who don't want to become teachers. And so when we changed that narrative, we began to look for solutions.
What are y'all learning? And I want to open it up to the other panelists as well, but just curious, what are y'all learning from having, you talked about, I think you said 18 of folks in the program who are from the community, right? What's the value in that, as opposed, not to say that teachers who are not from a certain area can't go in and be an effective, teacher, but what have you learned specifically with that demographic of folks who have come on and started working with students in y'all's district?
Yeah, there's a huge opportunity with people who already know the area, may already live there, want to be a part of that area. Our apprentices signed to stay with us 3 years after they get their certification. So for some of them, they are making a 7-year commitment to us. And so we have people who want to be there, people who want to double their income, people who want that social mobility, and people who love kids. And what a great combination that we have and we found. And I'm going to say, we actually have a showcase on Thursday, but I'm going to say that that all of our apprentices, when you hear them talk, they know where they're going, they know what they're going to do, and that pathway being laid out for them has been huge for them as they work to become a teacher.
Cadence, I wanted to ask you, because when we talk about the effect that, having teachers who are familiar with the community, familiar with students, for you, right, from your perspective, what should, decision makers be thinking about when we think about preparation through that particular lens of not only having, what the state would label, an effective teacher in the classroom, but also having a teacher who understands students, right, who can work with a vastly diverse, student body, here in Texas. I was wondering if you could just speak to kind of the value of that in your experiences as a student and having teachers, from various backgrounds who can relate.
Of course. So I actually went to a two-way immersion school before I moved to Katy as a kid. And all of my teachers were from all sorts of different backgrounds, all over the world, all different types of people. And that made a lot of the students there feel seen, like their teacher understood them, like their teacher understood where they were from and who they are. And I feel like having a good group of teachers from a bunch of different backgrounds in a bunch of different places can be helpful in that sense as well. On the topic of training and preparation, I think sensitivity training could be useful, as well as training in order to de-escalate verbal bullying. Because personally, I feel that as of recent, a lot of bullying and harassment isn't taken seriously in schools unless it is physical.
I'm curious, kind of building that, Stacy, for you, I mean, having experience like in the classroom, but also in this position you're in now, like, it's like you had the kind of boots on the ground experience, but now you're in like a unique position to be able to have some influence on the process and how the state, responds to the issues that it's facing. And what are things top of mind for you along these same lines, right? When you're, sitting at the table with, colleagues, whether it be the State Board of Education or when you're talking to lawmakers, trying to get them to understand kind of where we are right now, what are you bringing forth from a solution standpoint, trying to get them to kind of get on board with where the state needs to go?
That's a big question. I think apprenticeship models like what you're doing at Hutto ISD is important. Making sure that we're growing teachers from the areas in which they're going to teach is important, because you understand the nuance that those particular students bring. It will change how you discipline students. It will change really how you teach them, because you see their uniqueness. You see the exact issues that they bring into the classroom that may not have anything to do with academics, but influence academics, right? So for me, I'm always trying to keep the stories of the teachers top of mind when we're having these conversations at the SBOE meetings, because I think the teachers' voices get lost. And one more thing I wanted to talk about in terms of uncertified teachers. There are a lot of uncertified teachers entering the teacher workforce, but I think we need to have a more candid and a more serious conversation about how we keep them in the classroom. There are other jobs that they could have chosen, right? There are other professions that they could have gone into, but I think we need to do a better job of supporting those teachers, because they are filling the gaps that we have right now. So we need to meet them where they are to make sure that not only do they come for a year or two, but they persist and stay in the classroom.
Are we thinking about this in as nuanced of a way as we should? And hear me out. The thing that often comes to mind is, yes, the state has had an increasing reliance on, teachers without formal, classroom training. At the same time, what you've seen, though, is you've seen people be able to access the profession in ways that they haven't historically been able to, right? If you look at the overwhelming majority of roughly 384,000 teachers in the state of Texas right now, the overwhelming majority of those teachers look nothing like the vastly diverse student population in Texas that is increasingly getting more and more diverse. And so the one thing that the uncertified teacher, a lot of people have dubbed it a crisis, right? And maybe rightfully so when you look at a lot of the data. I know Texas Tech has done some research on this and others at UT. But how should we be thinking about kind of the access thing? What can we learn from this situation and take away from it? Like maybe, this isn't, this shouldn't be the primary way through which educators get into the workforce, but also there are things we can learn from that. Like, where do y'all come in on that kind of conversation when we talk about access?
So I'd love to chat about that. Hutto is a district of innovation. I currently have 16% of my teachers on the road to certification. I can tell you that this past year, I repurposed a position to have a certification specialist. And at the end of this year, I have 39% who have completed their certification of those 16%. So it's a challenge. It's hard. I do have to say that districts would really have a tough time filling all their positions without being able to let people into the field. We do have a requirement that our teachers on the road to certification have to complete it within 3 years. So that has been a nice component to make sure it just doesn't go on forever. But I think mentorship comes into play in all of this. one of the things I would love to see is really great stipends for teachers for mentorship. Mentorship varies. You have somebody who puts a ton of time into it, and you have someone who hardly meets the person who's their mentor. And how do we truly get people closer to the classroom before it's all theirs? And I think a lot about different teaching models. I think a lot about different things because I can't think of any other profession where we just say, okay, now it's yours, go forth. And, we wouldn't do this to doctors. We don't typically do that to attorneys. And why do we do that to teachers? And so how can we find ways to have that mentorship where there's some oversight and there's some guidance, because there are people who come into the profession, and I know because when somebody leaves the profession, they sit in my office and I have a conversation, and there are some people that the amount of support we're able to provide right now is definitely not what they need. They need a lot of support, and being able to individualize that and being able to do it differently than we are today would have great benefits for us.
Yeah, I was gonna say there has to be a new way that we support uncertified or new teachers. In Houston ISD, almost half of the teachers that are coming to Houston ISD are uncertified. And I think if we are bringing that many uncertified teachers to a district, we also need to rethink how we're supporting those teachers. I hear from some of my constituents that are entering the classroom and they're just like, I'm done. It's year one. I'm stressed out. I can't do it. But what happened to that fire when you got the contract? What happened to that fire that you had when you said yes, right? So I think we are doing teachers a disservice by not capitalizing on that fire that they have when they enter the classroom by holding their hand and supporting them along the way. So mentorship is something that we can do. I think we need to do more effective modeling in the classroom so they can see how lessons are taught, because some of the teachers are telling me, hey, I got this evaluation. I got a 3 out of 10, but I don't know how to get to a 7 or 8. So I think more modeling to demonstrate how effective teaching is done would help, and not holding them to a certain bar without helping them get to that bar is what we need to do a better job of in this state.
It's interesting. Everybody brought forth different points. The one thing I didn't hear, which is a priority across the street, is teacher pay. And so to me, that leads me to believe, and I actually visited Hutto a few months ago before the session, and it was interesting. We were sitting in with this organization, and there were a bunch of teachers who came in, and that was a similar theme, right, where I didn't really hear a lot about teacher pay. It was more about the preparation standpoint. And so the reason I bring that up, and I'm curious to hear y'all's perspective on this, is are lawmakers looking at this too narrowly as we talk about right now? The governor, one of the top priorities, teacher pay. The Senate, their primary method through which they want to raise public school funding. There are other things, but teacher pay is a big part of that. What are they missing? Or is there something that needs to be included in the conversation that's not currently being talked about enough?
I do say teachers need a livable wage, and I think that's huge. And one of the things that teachers will talk about is they may be in the field for 25 years and they're not seeing much difference in that pay range. And so I think that is a huge component that we have to consider. I think there are a lot of other things, though, and sometimes for teachers, I think there's the stress of accountability. I think there's all of those pieces. We're a TIA district, love that. I have 88 teachers who get that extra pay, but I love what Stacy said about how do we support people to get to that. I would say, the majority of your teachers are motivated by service, not by pay, but that doesn't mean they don't need to be paid for what they do. If we want this to be a profession, then we need to pay as we would in a profession, whether it's a 3-tier system or something different. I think pay is a first step. But it's a hard job. And I know when we talk about, and I was reminded of this recently, and I taught for 16 years, but I started when I was 21. And, somebody asked me about my early experiences, and I had forgotten that at year 3, I was ready to walk away from the profession. And it was exhausting. I felt very isolated. And I ended up making a move and taking a part-time teaching position. And for some reason, it was different. But it was different because I had taught long enough to develop the efficacy that I needed to believe that I could teach and believe my kids could learn. And so there's so many components, and I think for some people, the job is so hard that they feel like they're not paid enough. Both of those go hand in hand. We have to make the job easier, and we have to pay them for what they do.
I have a very maybe unpopular opinion about this. If we were paying teachers $100,000 per year, do you think that we would have as much of a shortage as we have now? I don't think we would. So whoever hears this, Governor Greg Abbott, I hope you hear this. Please let us pay our teachers $100,000 per year or more, because I think that will attract some of the top students that are graduating from these colleges, and even high school students that are undecided about what they're going to major in or what they're going to do would start considering teaching more heavily. And I think that will do a great service to the education profession if we pay teachers what they're worth. Because to your point, we are asking teachers to be military sergeants and social workers and attorneys and moms and dads. We are asking them to do those things, but we're not paying them to do all those jobs at once. So,
Go ahead, Cadence.
Like you said, I think a lot of teachers go into the profession because they want to teach, because they want to be of service rather than the pay. But I think for some people, the pay is what turns some people away from joining the profession. As much as so many people want to teach and want to help the next generation, if they can't make livable money off of it, then they are more likely to turn to a different career. And like you said, I don't think we'd have as high as a teacher shortage if there was that incentive to stay, and if there was that incentive to join that workforce to begin with, whether or not they have that passion, which I feel like a lot of them do.
Yeah, we're narrowing down. We're in the last few minutes before we open up the Q&A. This took me down a whole rabbit hole where we could sit up here and start talking about the teacher incentive allotment and paper performance for another 30 minutes, but we don't have time. I do want to kind of wrap this discussion up with what's happening at the Capitol right now and how that informs how teachers need to proceed and teachers need to be best prepared moving forward, right? I mean, we're seeing, increasingly, rhetoric and actions, against diversity, equity, inclusion. We're seeing a push toward disciplinary practices that the state had moved away from, in the last decade. We're seeing more and more the legislature, move in a direction where we want our teachers focused on merit and performance and not other things that also are important to student development. And so the reason I bring that up and frame it that way, because it's a really serious thing, because we know, I mean, you could probably point to, you could do a simple Google search and find any number of studies that talk about the importance of student well-being and how that correlates to student performance in the classroom, right? And so I'm curious to hear from each of you, given the political climate we're in here in Texas, what are the ways that teachers can best meet the moment for students and the diversity of the state students, given what's happening at the state level, and that ultimately teachers could ultimately be punished or penalized in many ways for doing the very thing they have to do to be able to get students on a pathway to success, not just surviving, but thriving?
Well, in my experience, and the experience that I've heard from my fellow classmates, students are more likely to pay attention and engage if the teacher is not only attention-grabbing, but kind and respectful. Now, this isn't necessarily to say that every teacher has to be all their students' best friends in order to get them straight A's, but when a teacher connects with their students and makes those students feel heard and seen, they're more likely to pay attention in class and perform better. Now, about being penalized for this, KDISD about a year and a half ago, August, I think, passed a anti-trans policy that would force teachers to have to out their transgender students to their families, even if it was potentially dangerous for those students to be outed to their families, as well as require students to request permission from these students' parents in order to address these students how they wish to be addressed. And in this sort of situation, this does not lend itself to a safe, happy place for students to connect with their teachers. It leads to students feeling like they have to hide themselves and their identity from their teachers at school, which in a lot of these students' scenarios is the one place where they feel like they can be themselves. If they can't be themselves at home, they feel like they can be themselves at school. And with these types of... Could you try again? No one asked. And if they can't be themselves at home, they feel like one place they can be themselves is at school with their friends and their favorite teachers. And if these teachers have to turn around and report these kids to their potentially unaccepting and or abusive parents, this leads to students feeling as if they have nowhere where they can be themselves, and this disconnect from not only their friends in their community, but their teachers and their education.
Yeah, I want to give you all opportunity too as we kind of wrap up here to chime in on this.
Yeah,
as well.
I know I answer this question with privilege because I don't have to worry about a principal or a superintendent coming down on me for answering this question this way. But as a teacher, you have the responsibility to teach and educate those little babies that are in your classroom. So that means you have to provide a safe environment. That means that in order to get them to learn, if you have to introduce them to story characters that look like them or that they can relate to, I believe it is your job to do so. And you need to do whatever you can to meet the needs of those students so they can meet the mark. So I understand the politics that are happening in our state right now, but I'm still standing on that question. Do whatever it takes to meet the very unique and nuanced needs of every student that's in your classroom.
And there's that huge piece of belonging and students being a part of the classroom and the school community. And I think we constantly have to continue to look for those gaps and to find ways for us to be much more intentional in how we're guiding kids and helping kids. Because at the end of the day, we want our kids to walk away ready for college, career, and military. And everything that we do, from the teacher in the classroom to how a teacher creates a positive culture, to the intentionality in which we build our programs, make a difference in whether our kids will be able to do that or not.
Matt? Oh.
Great. Thank you so much to our panel. We have a number of questions, and I hope we can get to as many here, but I'll also make sure that our panelists get a copy of all the questions so that you know what are on people's minds. Heather from Cypress Fairbanks asks, how can districts reorganize their professional development and training to support the growing number of uncertified teachers?
Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
I'll be glad to. It's differentiation. One of the things I started a few years ago was a very intentional new teacher orientation where they learn how to have a strong voice, how to manage transitions, how to do all of the little things that we forget about that set up a classroom for success. So the more we really think about where people are, and not just having that professional development for the teachers alone, but the administrators go through that with the teachers so then they know how to coach. All of those pieces can make a huge difference.
I was just going to say, actually just asking the teachers what they need and giving them space to kind of dump like what their concerns are so you can meet their specific needs. My cousin is actually a first-year fourth grade math and science teacher in Houston, and she's just telling me everything that's going on in the classroom, and I'm like, did you tell your principal? No. Did you tell your appraiser? No. And I'm like, well, how are they going to be able to help you if you're not, expressing yourself? So I would say, to echo your comments, just giving these new and novice teachers the space to ask for support and get that support.
Do you think part of that, I'm assuming, that probably happens with a lot of new teachers. I mean, do you think that's the case, where a lot of new teachers just assume that maybe I'm more overwhelmed than others? And is there a kind of dialogue or coaching that happens with new teachers to help that dialogue?
They definitely have to have a space for it, and I totally agree with you. They need that voice. There are a lot of things that they are maneuvering every single day, and they've got to have somebody they can talk to, if that's their mentor, if that's a new teacher team, whatever that is. A few years ago, I was in a district where we did some research of teacher retention. And one of the things we came up with was instead of just individual mentor-mentees, having actual teams on a campus. It seems like the more we get people out of isolation, the better. Sometimes I say this a lot, that resilience or perseverance should not be what we expect in order to keep somebody in the profession. Sometimes the people who make it are the ones that are just tough and keep coming back. But what can we set up where that's not the only factor in helping someone to be successful? So.
Celine from Pasadena asks, what are the most effective ways for educators to provide input to the SBOE or influence legislative decisions that impact teacher recruitment and retention?
Very good. I like that question.
Child?
So we have our next board meeting in June, and on the first day of our board meetings, you can come to testify on an item that's posted on our agendas, and then on Fridays, you can come and testify on any item related to education. So I'm screaming to the mountaintops to anybody who will listen, please come and testify, because we do factor in testimony very heavily. And if we don't hear from you, we really don't know what's going on. So I would urge teachers to come and testify, even email your testimony so we can at least read it. And then I know there are some teachers that feel like they may get in trouble from their districts if they're testifying in the capacity of being a teacher representing a district. So maybe finding a buddy or someone else who's not in the schools to kind of give your testimony at the board meeting.
Be ready to be there all day when you go to the State Board of Education.
Please
They will
come.
sit there all day.
I think this speaks to the wonderful kind of tension and dialogue here with thinking about supporting students and supporting teachers. Leslie from Houston asks, student learning is set back with unprepared teachers. How do you prioritize supporting unprepared teachers while ensuring students are not set back for life while being in these unprepared teachers' classrooms?
Yeah, that's the hard one, because it is critical, and I think this is where districts really deal with, what do they spend their budget dollars on, and especially when they feel like it's difficult. I think you see instructional coaches as something that sometimes go away. I think it's really important that districts have the funds to be able to see their needs and fill those needs with support. But I always say that everybody's a coach, from the principal to the assistant principal to teacher leaders. I think we all have to have a coaching mindset. And if nothing else, we really have to stop the isolation of the profession. And I know every district has PLCs, but are we really, changing what happens when somebody goes in their classroom and shuts their door? And so just continuing to do that and finding new ways to support, but everybody has to support. And we have to believe that we're all in this together. And really, at the end of the day, we're only successful when every student is successful. And so that joining together to make sure we are working as a team in our districts and in our schools is critical.
Cadence, any thoughts on that, just from having the student perspective and knowing people still in school?
Yes, so throughout my schooling years, there's definitely been a lot of classrooms I've been to where a student teacher is accompanied by a certified teacher, and that definitely, in my opinion, makes it so that both the students are learning the subject and the student teachers are learning how to teach, and so it doesn't lead to kids being held back or not prepared for the next grade, because they are being taught by a certified teacher. And when the student teacher is teaching, they're always accompanied by a certified teacher who knows exactly what they're doing and knows how to teach and knows how to teach the student teacher how to teach as well.
It was mentioned that so many come to the profession motivated by service, but we know that being motivated by service, you typically need a culture, right, that is enriching and supportive. And Kate from Austin I think this was earlier in the conversation, you talked about the culture of perfectionism. But what about the culture of politicization? We are in an environment where using teachers as a political punching bag is the norm. And I might add, you can think of politics in a macro level or even a personal level with parents and whatnot. What effect, Kate asks, what effect is that having on teacher morale? And while I think this was referenced, how do you begin to address that from various areas?
Well, in a time where everything is so heavily politicized, it, like you said, it is becoming normalized to treat teachers like a punching bag in this way. And like I mentioned, the KDISD anti-transgender policy, I think this lowers the morale of teachers because they have to sit there and know that if one of their students comes out to them as transgender, they have to potentially put them in danger with their family. And it can, I've heard from several of my own teachers as well as my friends' teachers in KDISD that it is soul-crushing to think about that kind of thing, to know that students that came out to them before the policy existed and before they knew that that was a risk that they were taking coming out to their teachers are now being put in danger of being outed by the people that they love and trust, their favorite teachers, and being potentially put in some dangerous situations. And so politicizing the identity of students and forcing teachers to participate in this transphobia can be demoralizing. And I've heard that several teachers are thinking about stepping away from different districts who have been passing similar policies because of this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that we are losing teachers because education is so politicized now. But I am just going to ask these teachers to organize and to get together and use their voices to speak out against the policies that are affecting them, their work, and affecting students negatively. So if that means going to the KDISD school board meeting or going to the SBOE meeting to make your voice heard, that's not just pomp and circumstance. That actually makes a real difference. I have seen in different districts where policies are overturned and they're changed because of the voices of teachers coming in number. I wouldn't suggest coming alone. I wouldn't suggest coming by yourself because sometimes I will admit if you hear just one thing, some of our leaders can ignore that. But when you come in number and you come continuously, I think you can make real change and make a real impact. So I would say all hope is actually not lost, even though we're in a tough time in education.
I think that leads us to our last question. We have a few minutes here, and welcome all panelists to add their thoughts. Andrea from Austin, looking forward, just what are the other opportunities that will support educators in a climate where, Andrea asserts there's an increasing lack of teacher autonomy and respect. But just what are some of those other opportunities that we may be able to seize for supporting educators?
$1 million question.
Not it. I mean, just to piggyback off of what I just said, I think this is an opportunity for teachers to really tap into what they believe in, really tap into why did I get in this work, and really tap into their own voices. I mean, I'm not saying that every teacher should become a politician or an organizer, but if that's what it takes to be the best champion for your kids, then that's what it's going to take. So I would say this is a great opportunity for teachers to use their voices, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, to really learn the work, to really learn why they're in it, and to seek support in various ways.
You know, I was thinking about the last two questions, and I have never had a teacher sit in my office and say he or she was leaving the profession based upon the politics, which I think is really interesting. I've had a teacher sit in my office and say that he or she was leaving because when he bought a home, his neighbor said, "How can you afford that? You're a teacher." So in thinking of all of it, I agree that our teachers need to unite and have a voice and at least exercise their right to to vote and some of those things. We have a lot of teachers in the state, and they sometimes don't realize how much of a voice they can have. So I think that's really huge. But I also think that the teachers we have in the field are there because they want to help kids, and I think that's something we can't forget, just how important it is for teachers, because teachers are the ones who influence the next generation. And I was talking about how kids don't usually go into fields of expertise if they had a teacher that didn't support them, or if they didn't like a subject because they didn't like a teacher. And so I think sometimes we forget just how important teachers are because they are helping the next generation constantly. And so, whatever we do, we have to find solutions because we need teachers, because we will always have kids. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, thank y'all so much for taking the time to do this. And I know there's much we could have talked about, a number of other things in addition to the things we covered today. But yeah, grateful for y'all, bringing interesting insight to this discussion. And yeah, thank y'all for all coming and listening to us, and the previous panel as well. And yeah, thanks so much. So thanks, Matt.
No, thank you, everyone. And of course, you can continue to read Jaden and Sneha's reporting on Texas Tribune.
Got a story this morning. Go read
There you go. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.